Powerhouses. All right, so let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your current role and what led you to where you are today, and why are you wanting to have this discussion? Why did you say yes to us?
Who's first?
AJ, we'll start with you.
I'll start? Okay. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. My career path is very long and winding. I've had an opportunity to work in the education field, in business, in politics. Don't hold that against me. Please, it was a great period of public service. But I really want to talk a little bit about the company I work for now. I never in a million years thought I would be doing government and community development for a tech company. I had heard of Paycom, but I wasn't super familiar. I'd actually been on campus one time where the CEO brought in a bunch of elected officials to basically yell at us about things. He wasn't wrong, we deserved it at the time. But I have this opportunity because I was willing to say yes. And I was always someone, as an elected official, who, if I could say yes, I figured out how to say yes. Yes, I'll do that interview. Yes, I'll talk to the media. Yes, I'll schedule an appointment with you. And I happened to say yes at the right time, did a television appearance, and our founder and CEO, Chad Richardson, saw me on television, saw me on an episode of Flashpoint one day. Brooks heard the story before. And picked up the phone and called and said, hey, I don't have anyone in my company doing, and this is a publicly traded, large, one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country at the time. No one does government relations, no one does community relations. We don't have an established corporate philanthropy program. Will you come on board and help me build that? So I get to be an entrepreneur in that we're building these things for this large, fast growing company. But one of the best things about my job is the opportunity to work with Chad Richardson, our founder and CEO. Paycom, everybody in here knows Paycom as a large Fortune 500 publicly traded institution, but it started in 1998 because the powers that be at the largest payroll provider in the world that Chad was selling for wouldn't listen to him when he said they should use the internet. And so he said, well, if they're not going to listen to me, I'll just do it. And found a niche, and then the rest is history. And now we're one of the most significant companies in the state, and one of the leaders in our industry for the whole country. And so my job is to sell that story with civic organizations and with elected officials all across the country. We do business in all 50 states and all the territories. And we have sales offices in 38 states and 52 cities. So there's no stopping us at all. And his story is an entrepreneur story, and it's my job to tell that story to the right people so that we get what we want.
Thank you so much for being here, AJ.
Thanks.
Sky?
So my career path actually started, I thought I was going to be a neonatal brain surgeon, and then developed this kind of squeamishness towards all bodily fluids. Now I have a toddler, so my whole life is bodily fluids. But anyway, when I transferred to that, I went and got my degree in PR and public relations. My entire career has been in marketing mostly, and tech and advertising sales. Kind of all over the place, from very small mom and pop organizations to global organizations. I've worked with Shaq. We are the same height, actually, so that was really fun to be able to look someone eye to eye. And celebrities and multilingual organizations, but the thin kind of the targeting point through all of those was being a connector to people and being an advocate for people who weren't in the room or things that were happening around the world. And so when I started getting in trouble at my jobs for speaking up about people being murdered or wondering why we don't have this accessibility feature or many things, when those things started happening, DEI really started to come on board. And so I became to be very fascinated in the theories and the ideologies, and not only why is this important for peak business functionality, but who is not in this room, and why can we not sell our product well enough or create this service and spread it wider. So DEI became a thing. And then as far as my influencer world, people be listening and I'm wildin', right? Like, so people listen and, I dance on the internet and things like that. And so for some reason, people do. And I was telling Elena earlier that if I can just be in a room, I know that it's worth my time if I can change one person's heart or mind. And so I'm here to talk about what I think might be some of the ways that we can change hearts and minds for the future of work to make it more accessible and diverse.
You definitely change hearts and minds every day, each and every day. Sky, thank you so much for being here. What about you, Elena?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. I think it's really great that Erica's bringing powerful women who care about the community together, regardless of what you hear today. Like, the connections are really important. Anyway, so I started, first of all, I was in the military for a while.
Thank you for your service.
Oh,
yes.
Thanks. Really, it was kind of a way for me to figure out what I wanted in life. I think that we're all kind of forced into being adults at the age of 18, which is ridiculous. So for still adulting. I know, we're still figuring it out. So for me, it was a way for me to kind of work that out. I think the thing that the military taught me is how to work for a common goal with diverse skills, people of all different types of environments and cultures and everything else. So with that, once I was through with that, I started a tech company. It was called A La Mode. Now it's been acquired by CoreLogic. And I worked there for 17 years. And it was a great experience, right? So I learned so much in that time. And during that time, going back to the early 2000s, I was the only woman in the room. So it was me and a table full of men all the time. And I was the one bringing the waters and taking the notes and all of the things. And so I developed a lot of good communication skills during that period. And also a drive to results for the company while also caring for individuals, because you can't have one without the other, in my opinion. And A La Mode, and at the time CoreLogic, is a real estate tech company. So servicing the real estate industry, making mortgages easier, more accessible, and things like that. So with that, I got this opportunity at one point to work with Tailwind. It's an interesting story because I was chief marketing officer there, so I had a whole team of 20 people. And with that, I was introduced to Tailwind because I took my team to a conference. It was Confluence back in the day. Yeah. And yeah, you probably remember Confluence. And so it was really great because I learned all these things about marketing, but also my husband, now ex-husband, it was really, I don't know how to handle that. Anyway, he had a food truck at the time. So I was doing all the marketing, on my lunch breaks and all this kind of thing, because marketing is no fun running a business. He had no idea how to market the business. And you can be as brilliant as you want to be in terms of your product and have this really keen passion and want to create a legacy for yourself. But if you can't market it, it doesn't really work. So I was doing all the marketing, at the water cooler and, standing out with the smokers and all of that. And so with that, I learned about Tailwind at Confluence. And so Tailwind is a company that helps really small businesses market themselves in really easy, affordable ways without hiring a marketing agency that they may not have budget for yet, or learning a whole lot about the intricacies of technical marketing. So that really appealed to me. So I became a user of Tailwind, and then one day I was on the website and I was looking for a help doc or something. And I saw that they were hiring for chief of staff, so I was like, okay, I'll try it.
No big deal.
And I think the thing that I learned from Tailwind is surrounding yourself with really brilliant people will elevate you as a person, as a leader, and as an individual, and as a caregiver for your family too. And so with Tailwind, we have office here in Oklahoma City as well as New York. And I think one of our mantras is that we want to hire the best on a global stage. So we want to hire the people that will take our company forward globally, not just locally. We're partners with Pinterest, Meta. We're expanding into other channels as well. So with that, my role there is really to create a really great culture where people love to work. They're doing the best jobs they possibly can. They come to work, they feel valued, because that's where the innovation happens. And so through that, we've been through a lot, pandemics and all, So the reason I'm here today is because I believe like all of you all have the power to change the way that women in the workforce and people of underserved communities are perceived and the way that we're valued in our community. So I'm really grateful for Erica for bringing me here.
Oh gosh, I'm really grateful for you all. Well, as you can see, we have enterprise, we have growth companies, we have gig economy creators and contributors. So we're going to have multiple perspectives. If you have questions, you don't have to wait until the end. Just make sure you go to the mic as we go on. But I want to tell you, and AJ, you talked a little bit about this, you know, how Chad, I mean, he was developing the future of work back then, right? When he went and told his CEO, hey, I think we should be on the internet. How are you and Paycom, as an established Fortune 500 company, are looking at the future of work now, today?
So just internally, if you think about it, we create a product that's all about working in a different way. You know, our software platform allows employees of small up to enterprise size businesses to manage all their own HR functions. And the goal is to, we had a campaign a couple years ago called get HR out of the middle. And it allows the employee to do all the tasks that they can do. And so the way that we're doing it both ways, we continue to push. We just had a launch of a product last year called Betty. And Betty's Better Enterprise Transfer Interface. I can't remember what Betty stands for, but it's Payroll Betty, and it allows an employee to do their own payroll. And Chad's concept was, who's more vested to do your payroll correctly than the employee themselves? They're gonna check it and look at, they approve their own payroll. And that was considered just, well, you know, old school was, well, you could never trust the employee to be, you know, they'd change their salary. Well, they can't do that. We're not idiots. But the product continues to push us forward. A lot of the innovation is, some of it's Chad's idea. At one point, they were all his ideas. They're not all his ideas anymore. Now the team brings him things, and he says, here's what we want to do. But then internally, we're our own largest customer. So our employees also use our product every day. So we've got this constant feedback loop. And we're looking at, do you soften the lines? We used to talk about the balance between work and your personal life, and that work-life balance. No one ever figured out what that actually means. There is no separation between work and life. There never really was. But business owners didn't treat it that way. They expected you to separate the two. We all know that you're never not at work. As long as you got your cell phone in front of you, you're at work. Or you know that it exists. Because you've left it at home before and freaked out, right? So what we do is allow individuals to work from where they want to work, to manage their work life in the palm of their hand using a tool that they know and are intimately familiar with, and it's theirs. I think that's the thing. When you talk about the future of work means that there won't exist any line between work and life. Now, that can be good or it can be bad, but we are all going to have to embrace that, because that's what the future looks like.
And I promise you, I totally forgot to thank our sponsors, by the way. Our sponsors, we are brought here together, obviously, in this beautiful space by the Oklahoma City Thunder Launchpad, who is one of our main sponsors throughout all of our programs, not just this panel series that we're doing. Also, Bank of the West is a huge partner of us throughout our programs, but particularly for this panel. And Vest. Vest is an organization that we founded in 2020 because of the disproportionate effect that the pandemic had on women in the workplace. And we just launched a fund, AJ, that I don't know if you saw, but literally our tagline is, we are investing in women-led companies that are reinventing the way we work and integrate life, because we completely agree with what you just said. We can't separate the two. So you're hired as our PR person. Thank you for sharing that. Sky, what about you? How do you see the future of work now? How do you, whether it's through We the People or as a creator, and don't get too much on the creator economy, because I have a separate question for you, but just kind of what you're excited about.
I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the innovative ways that people are incorporating DEI within their organization. I feel like it used to be, come work with us. We've got snacks, we've got pool tables, we've got all of these things. And now it's like, No, come work with us. We invest in green energy. Come work with us. We have accessible height countertops. Come work with us. We invest in policy that is good for humanity. Like, come work with us. We use pronouns. Like, there's so many ways that work is changing that that show that life and work aren't separate. That when we show up to work in this space, in this land, we show up with our identity. And our identities are being attacked, or our identities are being empowered, or whatever that may be, but we show up as ourselves. And so with DEI really taking off, it's allowing us, I think, to really put not just people over profit, but put humanity over everything, period.
I love that, Sky. Thank you. Elena, what about you and Tillman?
So I think, kind of to Sky's point, putting community over everything, I'm going to use that. Yeah, that's good. I think creating trusting environments is really important right now. So people need to trust the people they work with, and that's how you create the best work product and the best balance. So if you don't have that kind of trusting relationship with your boss and your coworkers and everything else, to stand up and say, you know, my kids are being a mess right now. I need to take an hour off to reset and then trust the fact that I'm going to come back online. I think that that evolution that we're seeing in terms of people understanding one another and understanding like our differing lifestyles and even the ways that people like process information, whether it's auditory or visual or they have disabilities or whatever that means. I think the fact that we are getting to know each other as people, not just as manufacturers or work product, is the most exciting thing about the future of work. But also, I think that as things like artificial intelligence and tech-enabled operations really persist, emotional intelligence is going to become a bigger thing. The art of persuasion, the art of collaboration, the art of conflict resolution, the art of all of these things are becoming more of a soft skill that's really going to get people promoted and what people should be actually hiring for. Because hard skills you can learn, but I think that that's going to be kind of the future and what we think about in terms of really great workers and people that can really evolve our companies to be trustworthy.
I love that. What scares you about the future of work?
We need more people that are engaged in the workforce. And what scares me is that, I'm going to put my policy person hat on for just a second, is that we're not recognizing that we have to have every bit of talent. No one can be left behind. We talk about the labor crisis, that exists because we're leaving people behind, because we're implementing policies and we're doing things as a society that allows people to not reach their own potential. There's a place for everyone. There's definitely a place. We need everyone's skills and talents, and even in large companies, you have to work really, really hard in a big setting to make sure that everyone is acknowledged and valued and included, and we spend a lot of time, effort, and energy and money making sure that we create that environment. But I really, just as an Oklahoman and as an American, worry that we are leaving entirely too much talent on the table. Every kid that doesn't finish school, every individual that lives unhoused, that is lost talent. I mean, who are we leaving behind that we need to help us solve problems? And that's what scares me.
Love that. Sky?
Hi, preaching over here. What time is church, AJ? I think the thing that scares me from an influencer perspective is one, the potential that internet, we could have to pay for it in the future. And if I'm working from my phone and, you know, Black, brown, queer folks are not paid the same as creators and influencers, then that is a barrier for us to be able to create. So I'm worried about the freedom of the internet, to access the internet, and also just general safety. There's research out there saying that hate crimes are on the rise, and so if we are out creating content out in the world, you know, I've got a Instagram reel of me in Target. I just got my vaccine booster. It's got like 50,000 views or something like that now, but in some communities, making a scene, causing a commotion in a Target, like, low-key luxury, like a Target, like that could be unsafe, right? And so the safety and the rise of hate crimes as people of the global majority advance and the scarcity mindset of white supremacy sets in, that's fearful.
Yep, thank you. Elena?
Profound fear. Yeah. So for me, I think it's that people that are in leadership positions aren't going to be able to keep up with what today's talent actually deserves and what they need. We've all probably been in positions where you had a disconnect with your leader and you just couldn't get through to them, so you just left. And I think that, you know, from my standpoint, I'm in people operations, but all of that has been seen as HR, and HR is fundamentally seen as like policies and ways to like mitigate risk, when it should be, how can I help people thrive? And so I think that that's a fear that I have, that there's going to be a massive disconnect, and the companies that master that and they have the money for people operations and they have the money to invest in those trainings with their managers are going to win out. And the smaller companies who don't have that, they don't have that training, they don't have the capacity to hire a people operations person, they're going to struggle. So I think that that's a risk. I also worry about, you know, college education. My kids, I have a 17 and a 19-year-old. So I want them to be prepared for today's world and not just academically. So I think that having that, what I was getting at before, that emotional intelligence and how to resolve some of the things that you're going to encounter in the workplace, it's going to be really gets you the job and what really gets you promoted and makes your life happier. And we're just not educating kids on how to do that.
So I heard some patterns here, right? A concern on workforce availability and the shortage that we have. Also, are we investing enough to create that and to meet the demand? I heard real concerns with safety and creating safe environments where people feel like they belong and they can operate at their maximum capacity and live to their potential. Love also, Elena, what you're saying. All of this is a pattern, and unfortunately I have to ask this. We live in a state where I continue to see de-investment in all of the three areas that you're talking about, and us being afraid to have these conversations, which they're not targeting at any one individual or any one race or any one like group of people. They're just problems. And we need to solve them, and we can't solve them unless we talk about them and we have those. Do you share those concerns, and do you talk about, to your point, Elena, as people, you guys are influential, you guys have power, you guys have access to the people in power and with influence to change things. Are those conversations taking place at the C-suite level, at your level? And if so, what are those conversations like, and how can we create change collectively? Anyone brave enough to answer that? We are.
I'll start by saying there's a primary runoff election next Tuesday. It's too late for you to vote if you're not registered currently, but the general election is November the 8th, and you still have plenty of time to get registered. So that's my first little plug. And I'll speak for major, and ironically, Erica, I had our internal communications director was in my office this afternoon, and he and I were talking about just our strategy as a company. When issues come up, where we engage, how we communicate with our employees, because we've got 5,000 employees. 3,000 of those are here in Oklahoma, another 750 or so in Texas. The rest are scattered across the country. So a lot of diversity, a lot of intentional diversity, a lot of attention to diversity. There are areas where we lead. As a company, we're a very outspoken supporter of the LGBTQ+ community. And when things happen in the public arena, we'll push back in creative ways, like writing big checks to the Trevor Project and Lambda Legal very recently. And then there are areas that we know we've got diversity within our employment base, so we're probably going to need to be just more strategic in providing an environment where there's an open space to talk. And I'll tell a little bit about the Better Conversations. We have wellness advisors that are part of our staff. Those are trained licensed professional counselors that our employees have access to at the workplace all day, every day. Either remotely or in person. And we also host a regular series called Better Conversations. And to your point, Elena, it really focuses on allowing our employees to practice hard conversations about controversial topics. So when something happens, part of our strategy is to bring our employees together and give them a safe space to talk about the issue. We've done that over, we had them over the Roe decision. There were internal conversations, and that's really kind of our strategy, is to look within our employees, how do we empower them to communicate how they feel, to vote, and to participate in civic discourse, and then also just as a company to pick those things that we will take a very public stand about, that are shared values, that if you're going to be in a position of authority at Paycom, this is the way we are.
Thank you for sharing that. Elena?
Yeah, we have this conversation at a board level and a C-suite level, and I think there's a few aspects to it. For one, our product is not going to be very good if we're not a diverse company. So probably like AJ, we service a lot of diverse communities. So women, minorities, people that are trying to do something for their families and build a legacy. So if that product is built by a homogenous group, how can it serve people of different mindsets? Even if it's a tech product, you have to understand like their problems and their viewpoints, and the fact that they don't have a ton of time to like log into an app and things like that. So for us, it has a business impact in terms of our diversity. And I think the way that we think about it is like, you can say that, but unless your house is in order and people feel safe and trusted, it's not going to do any good. So like before you go out and talk about your diversity and things like that, and Sky and I have talked about this, so you talk about your diversity and things like that, people have to have a safe space. And so we have things like radical candor training to have those conversations. We have regular one-on-ones where I give people templates where they can open up about what's going on in their work life. If personal, that's fine too. Whatever that looks like, but people have to be trusted in order to do well. So I think that there's a very real impact in terms of the future of our business if we are not representative of multiple communities and multiple identities. But on the ground level, it's how we talk to one another each day. So like, tell me about the best ways that you communicate. When are you online? What happens when I send you something and you don't respond? How do I not react to that? Like things like that. So I think that there's a very big business impact, but it has to trickle down to how we interact with each other on a daily basis. So we do have to talk about it quite a bit, to your point.
I love that. Thanks. Sky?
Oh, I can talk about this for a long time. Two of the ways, really quick, that we do that with We the People, we work on not just radical candor, not just everyone showing up to the table, but restorative conflict. And so how can you have that healthy conflict that allows you to show up vulnerable, to have transparency and honesty, and get it wrong sometimes, because we all should be striving to get it wrong, to get in proximity to more people who don't look or think or act like us, right? And so that restorative conflict practice is one way, and we start at the C-suite level. If they are not bought into DEI, if they are not bought into conflict is going to happen, so how do we have it in a healthy way? The other thing is we call our partners to the table. If we are working with someone, if we are supporting an organization that says that their house is in order, we want to see charts and metrics. And so for example, this past week, we are looking for a new project management software. This organization is a global organization. They work with millions of people. They have offices around the world. And they showed us their graphics, and they have 2 genders that they list. They have no indigenous people. And so that's erasure, and that's harmful. And so when we go into this partnership, whether we're spending money or we're volunteering or whatever that may be, we want to know that you are not harming people. And if so, then we need to restore that. And we need to make sure that C-suite is bought in. We need to make sure that people can show up in their full identities and kind of work through that process.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to stay with you, Sky. These past few years presented extraordinary challenges for women in the workplace. We lost 5.5 million jobs over the course of the pandemic. The unemployment rate for Black women and Latinas doubled over the course of the crisis, and today we haven't really fully regained them back into the workplace. And furthermore, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 3 women of color say that they're planning to leave their current jobs primarily due to burnout. A ray of optimism, though, it's otherwise, and this otherwise statistics that I just shared, is that we're seeing a surge of women entrepreneurs entering the thriving creator economy. But what is the creator economy? How many of you know what the creator, when we talk about the creator economy, raise your hand, just like honestly, like I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Or who knows what the creator economy is? Yes, okay. So there's people that didn't raise their hand, and that's okay. So tell us, what is the creator economy? How are people gaining money? How much money is there to gain? I read that it's about to be $1 billion industry, or it's projected to be. But tell us, just bring it down to the basics. What are the opportunities, particularly for entrepreneurs and particularly for women?
Yeah. So creators, that's kind of used interchangeably sometime with influencers. I prefer creator because I work hard on my content, but I also believe that we are all influencers. We have influence over the people in our homes or in our places of worship, in our offices. So I'm trying not to be boastful here. I had this crazy thing happen where I've gained like tens of thousands of followers off of one video. And so I have this greater reach now. But if you have 500 followers, if you have 1,500 followers, there is space and money and market for you to show up and have influence over people in the way that they spend their money, or the way that you influence people to vote and policy and things like that. Whether it's TikTok, Instagram, whatever your kind of niche is, you can make money there. And it doesn't have to be like, look at me, I'm this fashion person, or look at me, I do all of these things. People are making thousands and thousands of dollars by showing how they restock their pantry. People are making thousands and thousands of dollars by showing how they painted a wall or how they planted a garden. Like, if you are passionate about something, if you believe that it brings joy to your spirit, you can make money off of it. So that's kind of one side of it. And then I would definitely encourage people to choose your platform. I'm not trying to go hard in the paint on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and Be Real and all the things. Like, it's too much. So find the thing that suits you, and then find your niche. Like, yeah, I'm dancing, yeah, I'm talking about DEI, yeah, I'm talking about parenthood and being a Black woman and 2S LGBTQ stuff. I'm not talking about cleaning. Like there are things that are very important to me that I know and I love and I live, and those are the values of the people that are drawn to you when you show up authentically. I'm not staging things. Like, sometimes in the background there's going to be toys. Sometimes in the background there's going to be a pot of spaghetti. Like, I show up how I am.
I love that. And just for those that don't know too, brands and companies are using creators instead of doing massive production scenes. For those of you in production, sorry if I, but a lot of companies are looking at creators to do a lot of their reach to consumers, right? Because Sky is accurate in saying, like, she's more likely to influence her center of influence than a big marketing commercial that may or may not appeal to the masses. So I was just reading a report on all of the brands that are leaning to creators. Please, how is Paycom?
It's ironic that you mentioned that. So right now we have a crew in California shooting the second in the series of the Shamar Moore. Have you guys seen our Shamar Moore commercials? Yeah, Shamar Moore.
The
Shamar Moore, and it's a massive production. It's called Unnecessary Action Hero. They're fancy dancy ads. We also just recently signed Corporate Natalie from TikTok.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
so she would do workplace reviews. Yeah, she's now a signed spokesperson for Paycom. So, and large companies are doing both. They're doing all of it.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
we're one of those.
But it's a growing sector. I highly encourage you, and the same research that I mentioned, it also listed that women are primarily looking at this industry because of the flexibility it provides. It's a huge driver in the creator economy, is just being able to have that flexibility, but also to follow what it is that you actually naturally like doing. So I love, thank you so much for sharing that, Sky. What role can entrepreneurs play in designing tools, services, and solutions for the companies, right? So oftentimes we tell entrepreneurs all the time, if you want to become an entrepreneur, solve a problem, right? Solve a problem that you're really passionate, like you just can't live without solving that problem. It's bothering you so much. But sometimes it's hard, like if our brain is not wired to look for problems or to do that. So often we ask our corporate partners, we'll do a reverse pitch, right, to the founders. What are the problems in your industry, within your company, within the future of work, that you can see entrepreneurs were like, if they just focus on this, if they just help figure out how we can increase the pipeline of talent in these areas or whatever. What ideas do you have for people that might be in the audience or watching this video later? What are the areas of opportunity for entrepreneurs?
I've got one.
Go
If that's
for it.
okay. So we are seeing, as we diversify our workforce and as we invest more into our elders, or as we bring in folks who have certain areas of education in their degrees, a real need for tech education. How do you schedule a Zoom? How do you use Google Suite? How do you, set up Grammarly so that your emails look a little more professional? Like tech for people to make it appear like they walk the walk and talk the talk until they can get into the technology and really understand it better. That type of training, that's money, y'all, that's money.
Absolutely. There's a lot of need in that area. Mm-hmm. And actually we're going to have a future panel just like this on the care economy, and we're going to talk about longevity and there's a huge market to serve our elder population with training, with development, but also with care.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that. We will talk about wealth transfer, what happens when those elders transfer their wealth and what are the opportunities there. So be sure to follow us on Stitch Group for the care economy. It's actually, we're going to have one virtual next month and then one in Tulsa. So be sure to look out on that. Do you guys want to add anything? Any other ideas?
I'm going to put another hat on. As an advocate for the developmental disabilities community I work with, we have left those individuals behind.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of time. And as we try to be better as a society and incorporate them into to everyday life, there's a huge opportunity for innovations in technology to allow them to live independently and for places to work. One of my favorite new, not your average Joe folks, they're creating an environment that is designed to meet the needs of that environment and make really good coffee and create a space that we all want to be in. So anybody who's got an idea on how to better include those with autism and other developmental disabilities, you're my kind of entrepreneur.
Absolutely, I love that. It's an interesting question. No, it's an interesting question. I was thinking through the way that we think about talent management and things like that, because we do a lot of recruiting. And I think half of our interview process is just testing for, is this person going to feel passionate about the work that they do? And do their future career goals align with what we can offer today, and how can we support them in their future career goals? So it's not just like, can you pass a code test, or can you use XYZ tools, but can you really thrive here? Can you really function within the team? And can you add something to the team that we may be missing, not today, but long term? And so I think that thinking about the way that we handle the most intimidating part of our careers, in often cases looking for a job, and making that more accessible, and to Sky's point, making that feel more accessible so somebody's not fumbling around with Skype or whatever, but also like we as interviewers and we as leaders have easier ways to figure out if somebody is going to be a fit within the team and be happy and thrive here, not just today, but 3 years from now. And can we give them the tools to really kind of work in the way that they want to work so they can be happy? Because if they're not happy, they're going to leave. And so I think that that's kind of an area. We're good at testing hard things. We're not good at testing soft things and making sure that we're a fit.
Love that, soft skills. Monica, you have a question?
I do. As I'm listening to the three of you, it's super exciting about what you see for the future of work, but it's also a little bit scary for me, because I think about the last 25 years myself in the workforce, and I think about the leaders, the C-suite people, the people in charge, and how receptive that I've had to work for, or had the opportunity to work for in some cases, and I think about how receptive or not would they be to these concepts and to these ideas, that this is the reality of the future of work. So my question for each of you is, how, for those of us that may be in the room that have the ear of someone in the C-suite or have the ear of someone in leadership in our various companies, how do we communicate without offending? And I mean that because I know sometimes people just need to be offended. They need to just have the truth, right, put out there. But for those of us that may have the ear of someone in the C-suite in that type of position, what is your best advice for us to communicate these things that are coming, that are already here in some instances, that people in charge, business owners that we all, some of us work for that are not entrepreneurs that we work for, or that we may work for in the future, how do you communicate the importance of these things that you're talking about? I mean, Asia, you've talking about, having forums to have hard conversations. There are company leaders that believe to this day that's not the workplace is not the place to have that conversation, and it's not my responsibility as a company, business owner, to create that space. So how do you? But those of us that know that it is important, it's going to be a requirement at some point, right? I mean, as far as just if you want to maintain a workforce. So I guess my question is, how do you? What advice would you give to us that we could help? I guess in that capacity and help them see the light in some, I guess is the way to put that.
I love that question.
I have an idea for that. So I think that people want to solve the problems that are relevant to them. So by figuring out what their anxieties are, so just say, hey, what keeps you up at night? Or what are you worried about this year? Or what are you worried about with your career, your business? And then tying that to these needs of being a more holistic workplace is going to be your key. So if they're like, I'm worried about our profits. Well, are we really serving the broadest community that we can? Because we do not, or I'm just making up an example, but I think it's really tying into what makes people tick, and then you're talking to them and not at them. So you can approach it in really small ways too, like, what if we try this? And what if we have a different policy around this? Or what if we rethink this? And also bringing feedback to people too, because I think oftentimes leaders feel disconnected to the people that are really making a difference in their organizations. And if you're hearing this and you can bring it to them in a way that they're actually going to care about versus like, okay, that's just something in the mainstream media, whatever, I think that that's really going to be your key. But it's really forming that relationship first with that person that you're trying to influence and figuring out what they care about. So like I'll ask in my one-on-ones with my higher ups, what are you worried about this week? Or what is your long-term career goal? Or what is it that you really strive for as a business? So I think it's like creating that attachment and then like triggering in on whatever that anxiety is.
And I'll say, acknowledging that we're never finished. I mean, even folks that have done it poorly in the past can learn and evolve, especially when it impacts the bottom line. We've all read Good to Great, I would assume, many of you, except it's kind of out of date because a lot of those folks are gone now. You can't be static in business, and I'm lucky. I mean, I work for an innovative leader who pushes, and he actually is leading the change. He's leading the charge. He's the one that insists that we address these things. So the other thing too is it's a competitive market. Your desirable employees work for the right people. And it makes the life a lot easier.
I would agree with that. Like, love your approach. And I think that we should encourage, if we want to influence the room, we have to be humble enough and empathetic enough to have those conversations and get to know one another. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to have this conversation, you're going to lose out, period. It might be harder for you. It's going to be, I was having a conversation with somebody today, and they were like, oh my gosh, I can't. People are not applying for jobs with us. People are not staying. Maybe there's not driving there. And I'm like, oh, you really think that's what it is? It's a competitive market. So I love both of your answers. Sky, anything you want to add?
I mean, the fact of the matter is, in the kind of DEI world that I work in, coming into the workplace sometimes is traumatizing. The work that we do in speaking about and advocating for other people, sometimes it can't come from us because we're passionate about it, because it's our identity, or we see harm that is being done in the workplace. So sometimes it has to come from someone who doesn't look like us. And I feel like when I go into these rooms to have these conversations, I ask for a lot of information about who I'm talking to. What do they value? Are they analytical or emotional? And us as brown and black folks, we're storytellers. And so connecting life into work, into the issue or the harm, I think that's how we move it, either by having good allyship or by using our storytelling.
I love that, Sky, and I love that about allies and having other people step up to the plate so that we don't have to always be the I'm labeled passionate Latina, or or whatever it is, or the liberal, or the radical, or the whatever. Like I'm like, hey, it's your turn. Say it. By the way, I want to acknowledge the men in the room. Thank you for being here. Those who identify whatever, if you don't identify as a woman, because I believe that creating workspaces is not a women's issue, it's not an LGBTQ issue, it's an everyone's issue, and we should all be here listening to this conversation and making workplaces more equitable. So thank you for that, Sky. Okay, we have another question over there.
So are you guys seeing a trend to one-income families as part of the recovery from the pandemic and the reevaluation of what actually matters to us?
Share more, Vicki.
I just kind of get that vibe that before the pandemic, our values, there was a lot of consumerism. We would always complain that that's like, we buy too much stuff that we don't need, right? So now after the pandemic and people at home again, re-engaging in life in a different way, it's like, I don't want to go back to work, honey. I like doing what I'm doing. Or it may be the guy that's going to work, wanting to stay home and do that. And I think when you stop spending that excess, then you have a different level of budget that you can work with. So anyway, I just kind of feel like is that a trend? Are you guys picking up on any of that?
And from a major corporation standpoint, that is, by the way, Paycom's a majority female company. A lot of people don't know that about us. We were recently named the #1 workplace for women in the country.
Oh,
very proud of that.
Okay.
We also have,
Okay.
Comparably.com named us the #1 workplace in the country for women. So the response has been, in order to maintain that workforce, is again back to acknowledging there's no gray line there's no line between work and family. And you have to, in order to maintain that talented female workforce in particular, 12 weeks paid maternity leave, suite called Maven that allows you, use breastfeeding coaches and all of those things. The workplace is either going to have to respond and create a more family-friendly environment, or they're going to lose this workforce to a single-income family, or just to other areas of work. They're going to, make money off their TikTok account instead of going and supporting the work of major corporations. So I think the workplace will evolve because of that demand that you just mentioned, or will get left behind.
Are there any questions from the audience? And if you don't mind, just because of the mic, so we can record them, please make your way to the mic. And while you do that, and I'm encouraging you to do that if you have a burning question, I'm going to ask you, AJ, what about future of work and employee benefits? And I specifically want you to talk about your mental health, what you guys do for mental health, not just for your employees, but even for other organizations that might want to offer that. Can you talk about that?
And I'll say the benefits are another one of those things. You're never finished. We're constantly adding things, pet insurance, a commuter benefit for our city dwellers. In Oklahoma, you don't necessarily need someone to pay for your parking spot so you can take the train into the city, but if you're in New York, like our team members in New York, you can. But mental health is a very, very important, not only to us as a company, but to our founder. And so I mentioned already we have wellness coaches on site. We do have on-site physical fitness facilities as well. The Better Conversations series is vital, and it ends after every conversation with, remember you have these other resources. We really prioritize the use of the employee assistance program. If you've ever worked for a company of any size, you had one, nobody ever uses it, ever. So we push that constantly. EAP is Employee Assistance Program, so access to mental health treatment services. And then, of course, in the benefits package, insisting on parity between mental health and substance abuse treatment and all of the other health insurance benefits. Our founders also has a foundation called the Green Shoe Foundation. Is anybody familiar with that? So the Green Shoe Foundation, and he's a really rich dude, so he spent about 50 grand and went off to Arizona for a week to do a retreat to address his own childhood trauma. And he came back and said, you shouldn't have to be rich to have access to something like this. Started the Green Shoe Foundation. It's open, it's intended for functional adults. So it's not a treatment program, but it's a week-long retreat where you go every day from 8 to 5 for free if you complete it. You write a little deposit check to make sure you show up, and then you get it back if you complete the program, where you can address your own internal childhood trauma. And so all of those things are kind of, we just continue to add things as we see new need. We are right now in the very beginning stages of employee resource groups as well. And by the way, Sky, we're on the search for a DEI director, so I may enlist your help because we're striking out so far. But employee resource groups that our employees get together and say, hey, we want to create our own little workplace support group, and we'll have access to that as well. So trying to continually add things constantly. And technology, the pandemic actually in this area, it helped us a lot because it sped us up we're a tech company, and it improved our use of technology. And so through Zoom, if you're in sales in Los Angeles, you have access to Tanner Bergman, our Cracker Jack LPC that everybody loves and wants to get in to see. And so we've really employed technology to help us in that area as well.
Love that.
Oh, and by the way, we do have pet insurance, and which I also consider a mental health benefit.
Yes.
Because keeping your little pet healthy is very important to my mental health.
Yes, absolutely. Kaylin?
Yeah, I think so. We're a smaller company. We're 55 people right now, and I think for us, it's about meeting the needs of our people where they are, kind of like what you're saying. So we're constantly evaluating what the team needs. So we do surveys and things like that because sometimes for us at least, we can't continue to add benefits because we can't afford to pay the things that a lot of companies could. And we want to be good stewards of the money that we have. So with that, we're sunsetting some benefits and adding others. So for instance, 3 years ago, having the nicest office in New York was a thing. And so I was scouting for really great offices in New York. It's really expensive, but now it's making sure that people have the best work from home desk. And making sure during the pandemic especially that they had access to health care. So we would cover their co-pays for seeking that treatment, things like that. So we're constantly looking at what people need during that time. And granted, we could get a lot better. I think that there's always room for improvement on all of our fronts in terms of anticipating those needs. But I think it's really about meeting the DNA of the people that you're working with and the challenges that they're dealing with at the time. So in the beginning of the pandemic, we would do happy hours and mom support groups because we were all homeschooling our kids. Yeah, it was terrible. So we would have just times that we would drink wine in front of the computer and chat about our kids, and now that's not a thing anymore. So I think that the theme for us is just keeping up with what's happening because we're about to enter a recession and we don't know what that's going to mean or what that's going to bring. So the flexibility is super important in terms of benefits offering.
I love that. And the pattern that, again, I think we continue to hear over and over is just adaptability, right? To be leaders in the future of workspace, we're just going to have to continue to adapt. And then another pattern, continue to learn. We're never done. We're only 1% done. Continue to evolve and adapt. Last question, and I think we're at time, but go ahead, Jen.
I'm really glad I made it over here without falling too in these heels. So I work from home, so now I'm in slippers and sweats all the time. So putting heels on is a feat. I used to live in them.
I just tweeted that I need to relearn how to use these.
I feel like I'm stilts, and I used to be able to run in these things. So I guess the elephant in the room to me is the work from home aspect of work. I think a lot of us have hybrid environments and creating culture and connection when you have people at home. And I have millennial siblings and I have zillennial kids, Gen Z kids, and the attitude about career and work has really shifted. They are not interested in killing themselves for a company. They're interested more in working to live, not living to work. Like they saw parents, and their grandparents do. So I guess my question is twofold. How do you connect and recruit and retain this new workforce that's coming in? You need their talent, you need their skill set, but it doesn't seem like the company loyalty isn't as important to them as it once was, and the creating, the hybrid workforce or work from home workforce, how you create connection and culture in that type of environment. So 2 questions.
Great questions.
Okay. So I don't think it's a bad thing if people are with your company for 3 years or 2 years or whatever that looks like. As long as they're happy and doing really great work while they're there and contributing to your culture, I think that mentality has gone away. Like, oh, that person only gave me 3 years or something like that. And I think that we can't assume that somebody's going to spend their life with us, and nor is it fair for us to. So I think it's really like about aligning what that person's goals are, because like the younger workforce, they're thinking about things. When I talk to them about what is your goal, and they have a map. I don't want to work 60 hours a week, but I'm really passionate about Medicare, or I'm really passionate about helping the disabled community, or whatever that looks like. So I think it's about serving them and the things that they're passionate about, and knowing that they're going to go, they're going to leave at some point. And what can I do to set them up for success? Because that's going to free them to do the best work possible. And also, to your point about like not being a slave to your computer or whatever, it's like meeting people in their lifestyle is pretty important, and trusting them. So today's workforce wants to be trusted, in my opinion. Like everybody wants to be, they don't want to earn that trust. They want that trust by default so they can do their best work and take chances. So I think that communicating that like throughout the interview process is pretty important. But also just knowing that people are not going to be here for an extremely long time, and that's okay. It's about what can I do to help them, and what can I do to get the most out of them while they're here. So I don't know, it's a mentality shift. I was with the company for 17 years, and that was like the generation before us, and it's not the same anymore. And that's not a bad thing at all. I think it makes for a better global economy and a better culture that we all have different experiences.
I think I'm proud of Gen Z. I think that they're leading the way in so many industries and in policy and in humanity in a lot of ways. You could say that any generation is not showing up, fully and supporting the work that a business does, but I do think that they are leading in a lot of ways. And in this work from home time, we have seen investing a lot more in knowing thyself, whether that's the Enneagram or what your peak functionality times are. So like, don't call me from 3 to 6, but 7 to 9, like we game, understanding more about yourself and how you work well has been a good investment for us. And fun stuff like good computers, and I've got a really comfy like bean bag that I sit in at home, or cozy blankets. That was a great gift. So just thinking about the ways that people can be comfortable in, because we've seen that work still moves forward in our pajamas, in our fuzzy slippers, right? Like we are just as productive if I'm in my bed versus if I'm in Capitol Hill in my office. So I think that has been a good thing. And also Gen Z, they're just telling us that justice, equity, diversity, that should be at the forefront. And if you're not invested in that, because that is what their community looks like, that is what their family looks like, then they're not going to work for you.
2 things. The first one is what got us here won't get us there.
Yeah.
So we've always got to be moving. And then the other, what an amazingly incredible, wonderful problem to have in our society, that we have a new generation of workers that don't have to settle for manual labor, low-skilled jobs where the man was the only one really benefiting and the man was whose lifestyle was improving. What a great problem to have as a society. This is not shared among every nation in the world. It isn't. We have entire nations where just to eke out enough to eat still requires physical effort and toil. So we can lament it all we want, but it's a sign of our advancement as a society. Not everyone's benefiting from that. So I think hopefully, my hope for the future is that that's the next evolution, is that we get to a place where everyone has those choices and options. And yeah, entry-level jobs are still going to exist, and jobs where you get sweaty and hot are still going to exist. I don't know about you, but a lot of plumbers and electricians make a whole lot of money. They have advanced as a society. So as work evolves, we can look at that as we can look for the old days have gone, but they were never better. Today is better than yesterday, and I believe tomorrow is going to be much better than today.
Yeah, and not everyone wants to climb the corporate ladder, right? Like some people just want to be middle of the road. They want to show up and go home and have 7 million followers on the gram. Like that's also leading us forward, and just making sure that we value that insight that they're bringing. The Eldman Trust Barometer is it's like one of my Bibles in talking about trust in corporations, in politics, and NGOs. And every single year for the past 3 years, it's said that companies have the most trust, more than government, more than newspaper, or anything. So they're looking to us as business owners, as corporations, to be leading the way in diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, sustainability, accessibility, all the things.
Yeah, I think it's like opportunity versus challenge. Like it's super exciting to be a leader in this time.
Yeah.
Like we're going to be able to tell our kids that we were part of, helping this generation who's more connected than any other. So I think it's like reframing the thought a little bit.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love that. I want to close with this because at every session, it's great to come to the sessions and we all feel good and everything sounds great, but then what, right? Then we go home and so I always want to close with what are some tangible takeaways? What can we do? And I want to put this out there because when workplaces were designed, particularly in the corporate setting, years and years ago, they were designed for a very particular type of worker, which at the time was primarily white cis male, right? I'm not saying it was intentional or whatever, but that's who it was designed for. Women weren't taken into consideration, LGBTQ, nobody else outside of that one persona who typically had a woman or somebody, a partner at home cooking, taking care of the kids. And that's where you see all of the dysfunctionalities in our care system, right? And on unpaid work primarily falls on women and other people of color. So what are tangible takeaways that we can all take to be better as we create the future of work as entrepreneurs, or perhaps as we create more equitable workplaces for the future? What are some key takeaways, or as women? You mentioned something that I'm going to challenge back. I do believe that our new generation is pushing us to be better. I don't believe that we're stepping into that position. I think we have a long ways to go, and I don't mean to get political, but when we're taking rights to privacy, rights to make our own, how can we be talking about women, launch your company, create more equitable workspaces, we trust you to make those decisions, and I'm going to give you money to go build those companies, but hell, don't you dare do anything with your health. How can we honestly do that? So I want to challenge us to think about all of those, right? Because I think policy goes into place, workplaces, corporate, all of those things go into place as we're designing the future of work. So what are the takeaways you would tell us as people, as employees, as employers, as policymakers, as influencers, as advocates, to take home with us?
issue a challenge. We live in a state that is in the bottom of the barrel of the number of elected women. Now, we've had some outstanding statewide, just a little bit of everything. We will elect women. We don't have enough women that run. So I was I had to be asked to run for office, and I said yes. So say yes to those opportunities, say yes in your community, say yes to the school board, say yes. As leaders, as entrepreneurs, as individuals that are interested in advancing your ideas, you've got good ideas. And so the tangible thing is you are qualified. You are the right person to solve the problems that you see. Don't wait for somebody else, because nobody else is coming.
Sky?
Okay, I would say one, in terms of creator economy, Instagram economy, just show up as yourself fully in the ways that you want to be, with your braids, with your kinky hair, with your wavy hair, your shaved head, whatever that may be. Just show up and like live in that beauty and that power that you have in front of the camera. You might have to get comfortable with it. You might have to, have some videos that go in the delete pile, but just show up and commit to that. I would say also in terms of policy in the workplace, that if we are to move forward, because so much of our humanity is being downplayed, that if your organization is not focused on justice as well as DEI, then it's missing the mark. Because we can come into the workplace, sure, but we can't leave our womb at the door. We can't leave our skin color at the door. We can't leave who we love at the, technically, but my husband be texting me, so I'm not gonna leave that at the door. So we're showing up in these spaces fully, and so making sure that your organizations have justice at the forefront, whether that's how they're giving or how they're making noise or serving in the community. I think that justice and equity are really the two biggest things, in addition to diversity and inclusion. And I think the last thing would just be getting into proximity. The more that we get things wrong, whether it's pronouns or using outdated language, whatever that may be, I want to know your story. I want to know that how I can advocate for you. I want to know how I can stand in the gap for you if you're not in the rooms, because even as a Black woman, as a queer Black woman, I still have privilege over some other people who may not be in the room. And so getting into proximity with people, learning their story, and making sure that I can open any doors that I can. That's my last challenge.
I think for me, it's imposter syndrome is a thing for women. It's just there, right? And I think that knowing that we are qualified and that we are, to AJ's point, we are enough. We're doing really great jobs. We're doing probably more work than a lot of other people are within our organization, because we feel like we have to prove ourselves, and we have all the unpaid labor that's going on too. And so that creates the emotional intelligence as well as the hard skills, because we feel like we have to get there. So I think getting over the imposter syndrome, whatever it takes, daily affirmations, whatever that looks like, you got to get over the imposter syndrome, because I think that that's the thing that I have those moments when I'm like, should I say something? This is 5 guys in a room. Should I say something about somebody who feels marginalized, or they were used the wrong pronouns or whatever? But once I realize that they're going to value my opinion, and if they don't, I'll just get a different job. Or find somebody who will. And luckily, I'm in a privileged situation in the fact that I have a very supportive community. But I think the other thing too that I wish that I would have done, that you all are doing a great job of, is networking. Getting in touch with people that represent different identities, different women, people who care about the same things, and justice and everything else, that may have had, I call it phone a friend. I phoned Natalie this week, that have done things that you haven't. So you can lean on them too, and there's power in numbers, and there's power in investing that time. And it's okay to invest it away from your kids, your spouse, or whatever it is that you're going on. It's not selfish. Investing the time in yourself is important, and we don't do that enough.
I love that. Whether we like it or not, we still hire, promote, invest, and appoint in networks. And I do believe that women, we just network a little bit differently, right? We don't just go to events and, hey, how are you? And let's exchange cards and then go home and we build community, right? With people that have the same interests, that have the same, call for change and all of that. So I love that you mentioned that. And that's actually what we set out to do at VEST, is to create those networks for women to be able to leverage each other to find those opportunities. So great closure. Thank you so much for that. And I will do another plug on imposter syndrome. We had Ruchika Tulshan, who is the author of Inclusion on Purpose. She was one of our speakers at one of our VEST sessions, and she actually challenges the imposter syndrome because she says, because we've designed workplaces that weren't with women in mind, we feel like an imposter. But what we should be calling out is we should be fixing the workplaces, not women, and we should be calling out the systems that instill that imposter syndrome in us. So I encourage everybody, it's on the podcast, anybody can listen to it, but listen to that podcast because it's so powerful and it reinforces everything you just mentioned. Everyone, thank you so much. Happy hour. Please network with everybody, and thank you so much for being here.